I'm kind of unique in the fact that I'm a lot older than what most people think I am, and I'm probably, with the exception of Bobby Montgomery, I'm the oldest person in this organization. I was born January 19th, 1944. You do the math. You do the math. And I'm gonna tell you, we're gonna start back then, just to tell you, kind of bring you to date. And when I get through talking, then we're gonna look at this map back here. The best part of it you can't see. That Lubbock, Texas, is right there about where my nose is. And I've kind of put a lot of people on different places to show you where they were and some of the run-ins we had and a little bit about them. Hopefully what I'm done here, you can better understand what it was like for all those guys that was becoming hit songwriters and musicians and all that stuff coming out of that area there. And not that I was one of them, but I was there. I was there in and out of it, and I had run-ins with some of them, knew some of them. Some of them I didn't know, but it was being born in 1944. Well, I was like a kid when Elvis Presley came along, and I saw rock and roll start from the very beginning. But anyway, my daddy had a farm. I grew up on a farm. First 6 years of my life, we didn't have running electricity. We didn't have electricity or running water. We just had it was a 3-room shack, and there were 6 kids. 5 girls. I was the 4th child to be born, and my daddy was so proud of me. He was so proud to have a boy that he took me to town, and no one believed that he had a boy. He had so many girls. So every time he'd see someone, he'd pull my pants down, my diaper down, and it kind of affected me. I think after
true story.
This is a true story.
So that's when it started. Yeah.
That's when it started right there. Not only that, when the first time I went swimming in a public swimming pool, I had to wear the bottom half of a girl's 2-piece bathing suit. And then I was probably in junior high before I finally realized that I didn't have to squat to pee. So, but anyway, I kind of got out all of that, and I don't know what you know about West Texas, but you can see this map behind me. We'll get into that a little bit later. But all the counties are square, and that used to just be grass out there around the turn of the century. And then the wind blew and all that kind of stuff. They got rid of all the Indians, and then the big ranchers come in. And then it was more profitable to be farming and have farms and stuff. And so they started breaking those ranches up into farms, and that's when the Dust Bowl started. It's all over the Midwest. They started plowing that grass up and making farms, and oh, did it blow out in that part of the country, and it was really dreary. But those counties are like about 30 miles square, and there's a county seat in the middle of every county. When they built those counties, my daddy told me, said they made them big enough and small enough that anybody in the county could get in a wagon and drive to the county seat, which is in the center of the county, and come back home that same day, do their business and come home. And most of those county seats are just little old pissant towns, but then they got little satellite towns that are even smaller than that. My hometown there's population 403. All my life is population 403. And we'd drive to town, and in Texas, all the towns, they put the population on the city limit sign. We'd drive into town, and I was asking my daddy one day, I said, how come Wilson never gets any bigger, gets any smaller? And he said, well, it's this way, son. Every time a baby's born, some feller leaves town. And anyway, I got I guess about the time I started school, I was six years old. Well, Daddy built a little old frame house, and we moved out of that little old 3-room shack, but it was still just a little old frame house living out there on the prairie. And then we were 25 miles southeast of Lubbock, not too far from Post. And by the way, if you ever want to see where the plains, the plains between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains, then the South Plains, and then where the plains ends and all the rolling stuff begins, if you want to see a very stark vision of where that is, drive out to Post, Texas, and then up that hill. It's like driving up one side of a canyon, but there's no other side. You get up on the top of that canyon, and then it's just flat. You can see all the way to Montana. It's quite a sight. Like where I grew up, you could stand outside on the front porch and look north at Lubbock, 25 miles away, and southeast at Tahoka, about 10 miles southwest rather than northeast. You could see Slayton. You looked to the southwest, you couldn't see a thing. It just pitch dark. That's because the Caprock was there, and it dropped off, and that's where the rolling plains began. We were about 10 miles from that spot. Anyway, Wilson, Texas. There was a population of 403. We had 6 churches: Baptist Church, Baptist Mission, Methodist Church, Methodist Mission, 2 Lutheran churches, St. Paul, St. Luke's, and we had a Catholic church. And then Church of Christ and Pentecostal and all those people, they had their little church houses out in the country. I mean, everyone went to church. And if you weren't a born again Christian, you were on someone's hit list. I mean, they were after you, and it was a pretty religious kind of a place, you know. But we had our bootleggers too, you know. So there was that part of it. And music was kind of a sinful thing if it wasn't at church, you know. And my mother always told me she didn't want me playing at them dirty old dances and stuff, you know. And I always quizzed her where those dirty old dances were. But the beginning, where the music really started out there, first off, everybody went to church. You know, that's where I learned how to do harmony, was church. And then when my dad was out there, he moved out there. He grew up on a farm over around Lipan near Stephenville. And my mother, she was from Royce City. They met out there years later, but he moved out there like 1922 with some of his brothers, and they went out there with horse and buggies to get out there. That's how they drove out there. Everyone went out there to find work. They couldn't get work here, and the boll weevil, they couldn't raise cotton here. The boll weevil was killing all the cotton. You could raise it out there because of the elevation. And that country just started growing, but when he was a young fella out there batching, he said every Saturday night somebody had a dance at their house. They'd go to the house, somebody's house, and they'd have someone playing the guitar and all that kind of stuff. And then that's how they had their fun, you know, drink the beer or whatever. But it was all just music and dancing. And when I got in grade school, I guess about the 3rd, 4th grade, they wanted me to take piano lessons at school. And I wouldn't do it because it's sissy, you know. But then they came along. They started a high school band, and I remember when they got those uniforms and everything. My mother and everybody, they were sewing up those uniforms, and there's only like 90 kids in high school, and we played 11-man football, and the football players couldn't march, and they had to have somebody to march. So they'd start teaching you how to play instruments when you was in the 5th grade. So by the time you got to the 7th grade, you could march and play in the high school band. Well, I wanted to play the trombone, and I was too far back in line. You know, we rented all of our instruments, and the band director, he taught me into playing the baritone. It's kind of like a small tuba. I loved it, but there I was, just a little old kid. Every day I was carrying this big old baritone home. It's about twice as big as a D28. You know, you're carrying it home on the bus and everything. And I got pretty good at it. I guess my freshman, sophomore year, I was first year baritone in the all regional band, and I would have been in the state band, I think, if I hadn't read bass clef, because we had to read certain pages in a certain book, and everyone was treble clef pretty much except me. And bass clef, everything falls on a different page, you know, because it takes up more space or less space or whatever. And I had to sight read. I ended up having to sight read like a whole page of 16th notes with those 3 judges just sitting there looking at me. So I was runner up, and I probably wasn't as good as old Craig Langford. You know, he made all state on playing the French horn. But anyway, I played the baritone, and then about that time I discovered girls and guitars. You know, Buddy Holly was coming along playing those songs. Elvis Presley had been there. I remember my sister came home telling us about seeing this guy up on stage wiggling and everything. I think it's kind of an outside stage, and it's Elvis Presley. That was before he was ever on Ed Sullivan or anything. He was kind of touring through there. He and Buddy Holly, I think, got to be pretty good friends. Anyway, Buddy Holly and all that kind of stuff, we started a little band. Once I started learning how to play the guitar, I went up to Harrod's Music Company and got me. I ordered one out of the catalog, and it wasn't very good. I played it for a while. I had some little old music lessons as I was studying at home. And then I went up to Harrod's and got me a guitar, and I didn't realize it till I started doing research for this little talk I'm doing that I took a couple lessons from a guitar instructor up there, and the same one that taught Buddy Holly how to play. Clyde Hankins, I think was his name. Anyway, I started a band, and I was raising pigs. If you're a farm boy, you raise pigs, you know, and for FFA and 4-H and all that kind of stuff. And I got pretty good at it. I was winning truck prizes at the stock shows and everything. That's how I got my money, and kind of developed a reputation for it. And one day the phone rang. We had this old black phone on the wall in the kitchen there, and Daddy comes in and he says, "Hey, Junior," he said, "this Mr. Caldwell over in Slayton, he's coming over. He's got his boy. He wants to buy a pig." So they come over and I get to talking to this boy. He's trying to catch a pig. His name is Don Caldwell. I don't know if you who Don Caldwell was, but Don Caldwell grew up to be one heck of a saxophone player, and he owned a recording studio there in Lubbock where Joe Ely and the Maines brothers and all those people made their records, and he's a big promoter there in Lubbock of the Buddy Holly days and all that stuff. And he owns the Cactus Theater there, and he developed all that area down there where they do all kinds of musical stuff, and he owns about half of downtown. Big guy, knows everybody. Well, anyway, he came and he became our sax player. And we did our first dance. We played like 9 songs. That's all we had. We just played them over and over. Mm-hmm. And he had this buddy over there that came with him out to the farm there one day. Played saxophone also. This kid comes in, high school kid. He had on glasses and everything, about our age. And he said, "Junior," that's what they call him back then. He said, "Junior, I want you to meet Bobby Keys." I don't know if you know who Bobby Keys is. He's also a saxophone player, and I'm going to jump forward and I'll come back. But I was in New York City, living up there, and my wife and I, we went to the Ziegfeld to watch this Hail Rock and Roll. Keith Richards put his band together to support to play with Chuck Berry, and it's kind of a tribute to Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was playing in the band too, and they had a saxophone player, and I said, "Honey, that looks like Bobby Keys," and it was. And when I got back to next time I went back to Lubbock, I went over to see Don Cole, and I said, "Don, is Bobby Keys playing with the Keith Richards?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "He's the Rolling Stones sax player," and he toured with them for like forever, and he played with just about everybody. He was like, they said, the #1 rock and roll sax player in the United States there for a while. He died. He died recently. Anyway, that was Bobby Keys. Then to get up to Texas Tech, started a new band. We had this guy from Levelland. He and I got together. He was kind of a protege, or what you call it, of one of the guys in the Sparkles. I got to know all those Sparkles there for a while. I didn't know them very well because I kind of knew them through him. But we got to playing around for all different kinds of places and stuff, and got pretty good. We were playing places, just drive about as far as you could drive and drive home in one night. We'd go like Carlsbad, New Mexico, and play prom and that kind of stuff. And one day this kid comes up, and we knew him. I mean, he's from Brownville, and he played a little old Hofner bass, and he wanted to be in our band. So he could sing and he could play a lot better than the guy we had. So we hired him. We got rid of the guy we had, and his name was Gary P. Nunn. I don't know if you know who Gary P. Nunn is. Well, Gary P. Nunn was our bass player for a while. He didn't go by P. It was just Gary Nunn. And he was a nice guy. He was one of these guys, we didn't think rock and roll was going anywhere. We were just playing in music, playing for fraternities and all that kind of stuff, having fun. Our main thing was to get out of college eventually and get a real job, And rock and roll wasn't going to last forever, nor was music. But Gary, you could tell there was something serious about Gary. He's a very good musician. I mean, if you were slow or you were flat or whatever, you didn't know your parts right. I mean, he was really particular about all that. And after 2 or 3 dances, I think he realized we weren't good enough for him or something. And he quit, started his own band, and shortly after that, he moved to Austin, and I never heard from him again. And I'm going to jump forward again. I was sitting in my office there in New York City. I worked for Pfizer up there. I was up there twice. First time I was up there, I was single, but I was sitting there. I was listening to the radio in my office one day. I worked right in Midtown Manhattan, and they were talking about Jerry Jeff Walker was they were playing a Jerry Jeff Walker record, and I got to listen to it. And said, I recognize that voice. And I said, hell, that's Gary Nunn. And it was Gary P. Nunn was singing that song, but they were giving Jerry Jeff Walker credit for it because it was on his record. And it wasn't long after that. Well, I was reading the paper. Gary Nunn and Ray Wiley Hubbard were doubleheading at the Lone Star Cafe up there. So I went over there to see Gary. I guess he remembered me. He remembered the situation and everything. And we got to talking and everything, and I was telling him how proud everybody was of him, as good as he did coming from where he came from, and everything. Then he tried to sell me a T-shirt. Kind of pissed me off a little bit, and finally I got tired and went home, and I guess I've never talked to him since then. I wasn't mad at him or anything, but that was Gary Nunn, and anyway, let's see where we go from there. I got to tell you a little bit. This really isn't about songwriting. I haven't written songs about this yet, but when I moved up there, I got an apartment over on the west side. This was like 1979, I guess. Got an apartment on the west side, paying $400, which is a lot of money then for like a 10 square foot apartment. And it was in an old hotel that they had remodeled, turned it into an apartment building. I was on the third floor, right across from the American Museum of Natural History, and I wanted to see the Macy's Day Parade. You know, it's Thanksgiving, and if you ever worked in New York City in one of those big companies up there, you find out pretty quick that most people that you're working with don't live in Manhattan. They live in not Connecticut or New Jersey or someplace. I knew one guy that commuted from Philadelphia. But I kept asking people, where's the best place to go? I wanted to see that parade. They couldn't tell me. They didn't. You know, someone would say, well, maybe do this, do that, or I'll talk to so-and-so. And I just forgot about it. And I went over to Old Looney's. I got off work, went to Old Looney's. I met one of my boyfriends over there, and we were drinking beer and everything. And it got pretty late, and I got in a taxi to go home. And I couldn't get within a block of my apartment building because the staging area for the Macy's Day Parade was right in front of my apartment. They had all those, those big duck balloons and everything laying out there, and they had fishing nets that they threw over them and put sandbags on them, and then they'd blow them up so they wouldn't float away. And kids walking around, with their trombones and everything, and just having a big old time. I got up the next morning. I couldn't wait to get up because the starting line for the Macy's Day Parade was right down at the end of the block from where I lived. And I went down there, and I've never been so disappointed. I couldn't see anything or hear anything, so I went back to the apartment and watched it on TV. And I was getting on the elevator one day, and there's this big black guy. I mean, a nice guy, but it's a little bitty elevator and great big guy, and he got off the elevator before me, and he talked to the doorman a little bit as he went out, and I got up to the doorman, and this doorman, I don't know, he hadn't been up there too long. I'm not sure what all he knew, but I said, who was that guy? He said, so you don't know him? I said, he's a boxer. And I said, a boxer? Yeah, what's his name? He says, Too Tall Jones. And I don't know if y'all remember or not, Too Tall Jones, he played for the Dallas Cowboys, and he became a boxer and moved to New York City. Well, I lived in his building, and he lived in my building. Yes, we shared that elevator, and I thought that was kind of funny. And then this is how weird my life has been. It's kind of been this way all the way along. If you ever taken a taxi driver, if you've ever gotten many taxis up here in New York City, you learn everything. They're like the gossip channel for the whole everything that's going on up here. And I got in a taxi cab one night there in downtown somewhere, and I wanted to go home. And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, 50 West 77th. He said, 50 West 77th. He said, that's where all those people got killed. I said, what? He said, is that Park Plaza Hotel? And I said, yes. Yeah. He said, well, oh. And he started telling me about it. And make a long story short, there was a serial killer. He murdered eight people in that hotel, and they just find them laying around. And it ended up being the porter. He'd get them on that elevator and kill them. Most of those women, he'd kill them, and then he'd rape their dead bodies. I mean, it was horrible. And the taxi driver, he said, "Don't worry about it." I said, "I think they found them most of them on the third floor," and I lived on the third floor, and we quit. I just quit talking to him about that then. But that's the honest gosh truth. So I lived in it's old Park Plaza Hotel. They had like a drug thing down in the bottom of it, before they remodeled it. And it wasn't long after that I started looking for an apartment to buy, I wanted to put some money into something. I didn't have any money to put into anything, but what they would do, they had rent control up there. So to get out from under that rent control, these people that own these buildings, they would sell the building to the tenants, and it would become like co-op apartments or condo apartments, if you want to call it that. And I found this nice apartment building over on Brooklyn Heights, right at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. So I go over there, and I bought a nice efficiency apartment on the 9th floor, right at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge, and you could catch the subways and all that kind of stuff and get right into town, into Manhattan. It was so easy, and it's a nice area. And I paid $9,000 for an apartment. Put it on my credit card. I had like $1,000 put down. When I moved out of there, I sold it for $20,000, and I thought I was a real estate tycoon. And now it goes for about $600,000. So that's the way the real estate went, right? And while I was living there, I was jogging. I belonged to the New York Roadrunners Club, and I'd get up and run across the Brooklyn Bridge, because right at the foot of it on that Brooklyn side. I'd get over on that bridge, and they got a walkway right in the middle. It's like a double highway on each side, going each direction, and then in between they have a elevated wood walkway that goes all the way across. I was running across that, and it's so pretty up there. It's because the sun is coming from your back, and it shines on those buildings. The World Trade Center was right there, and you could see it through those silver spires. It's like you're up there in a spider web. It's so pretty, and you could run off the other end of the Brooklyn Bridge, around the Battery Park, and around the World Trade Center, and come back on the bridge. But it was dark. I got up early one morning. It's dark up there, and I guess it's wintertime. I could see there was a crowd up at the top. I didn't know. I figured someone got mugged or something. They got up there and they were filming a movie. And to make another long story short, I ended up getting invited to do a scene with Matthew Broderick on top of the Brooklyn Bridge. And I did a film with Matthew Broderick. And I was the jogger. I had to jog by. They put us behind the tower over there, and this guy had a walkie-talkie, and the director, he was up there on the top of the bridge. And he said, "Okay, tell the jogger to run." And then I'd run, and Matthew Broderick was up there with the camera taking pictures. The name of the movie was No Small Affair with Sally Fields, and they paid me and everything. And I got to talk to Matthew Broderick. So he came over. He said, "Are you a real jogger?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And we talked a little bit. He was like 16 years old, just a kid. And I was telling everybody at work that day, I was going to be in a movie with Matthew Broderick. Everybody's so jealous of me, I was so proud of it. And about 2 weeks later, I walked into the office, and his secretary sitting there. She grinned. She said, "Harry," have you read the Post today? And I said, "No, what?" She said, "Your movie got canned. The director had not a heart attack, but he had a stroke or something. Probably they just decided they didn't want to finish the film, but they finished filming it, and they finished what they were doing, and they refilmed it years later in Hollywood somewhere with different actors. But if you ever see that movie, No Small Affair, I was almost in that movie with Matthew Broderick. And then let's see how I met my wife. I was up there when the Urban Cowboy came out. This is kind of songwriting, really. The Urban Cowboy, John Travolta and Deborah Winger did more for country music than anyone in the world has ever done. Because as soon as that movie came out, everybody just fell in love with country music. They wanted to wear cowboy hats and boots and jeans and all that stuff. And you couldn't walk down the sidewalk without looking in the building, and boots and jeans and all that kind of stuff for sale. Leather jackets with fringe on them and everything. And everybody wanted, and they wanted to dance country western and everything. And they had all these clubs, and you'd go, and they didn't know how to dance counterclockwise like you're supposed to when you do the two-step. They looked good, but they didn't dance good, And I met my wife at one of those places, and she was an actress and a waitress. Everybody that's an actress up there is a waitress. And she was a dancer. She was in one of those dance troupes, and she was in all kinds of plays and stuff, mostly the traveling versions of the plays. She wasn't in any of the Broadway plays per se. Some of her roommates and stuff were. But she acted, and she was on the soaps. She was a nurse on As the World Turns, I think, for quite a while. She had a talking part. She said it just scared the hell out of her. It was before they had before they did, everything was live. They did everything live. She said those actors had changed the lines up and stuff and tried to throw them off on live TV. But anyway, we got married, and then Pfizer moved me to Wichita, and she finished her degree in psychology down there, and then they moved us to Kansas City, and she finished a master's degree, and like being a mental therapist and substance abuse and all that kind of stuff. I finished my MBA there. I got an MBA, and I was very interested in computers. We had laptop computers and stuff, and I got a MBA with a concentration in management information systems. And I wrote up a new job description. The first time I'd gone to New York, I guess I skipped that part of it. I went to New York. I was living in Lubbock, and I got divorced and moved to Amarillo, and then I took a job in New York City, and that's when all this New York City stuff started happening. And that met my wife. Then we moved to Wichita, and then I got my MBA, and I wrote up a new job description for someone to teach the field force. I worked in the Pfizer Animal Health Division. We had about 100 salesmen in the U.S., and everyone's getting laptops. The real internet hadn't come yet. We were doing email with a CompuServe. We're spending about $250,000 a year just for a real basic email system, and needed somebody to manage that. And I told them I wanted to do that, and they said, "Well," said, "you can have the job." I thought I could do it in Kansas City. There, we had some offices there, and they said, "You can have the job." I said, "The job's going to be in New York City." So they moved us back to New York City. And it was kind of fun. I mean, being married to my wife, she had been up there about 10 years before I moved up there. And she was a really good social director for a little old country boy like me. And I was country. And a lot of people laugh at me. I had an office. I was on the 17th floor. It was about a block from the UN. I was 235 East 42nd Street was our address. And I could look out my office window, and right across the street from my office was the Superman building, the news building, the one that had the big globe out in the hot lobby, and up on top, that Superman, the helicopter was about to fall off the edge, and Lois Lane, she fell out of the helicopter, and he had to go down there and grab her. Well, that was the building right across from my street. It was the news building up there, and then that was across from me, and then I had a little office. I really enjoyed working at headquarters. Headquarters is fun. I mean, it's busy. I was doing all kinds of stuff. But I was a product manager for. Was coming with a new product for feed yards and stuff. And a lot of companies, they'll take salespeople out of the field. I was a salesman, and make marketing people out of them because they've got a product coming that they know about. So I knew about feed yards, and I knew about animals, and I knew about drugs and selling drugs and stuff. So they made a product manager for a new product that's coming along. But anyway, living up there and working in that office, sometimes I'd get so bored and I'd get so homesick. And I swear, I would sit there and I would get homesick for a sandstorm. I would start fantasizing about living out in West Texas and those old sandstorms. I mean, when those old sandstorms come and they hit, boy, it's like, it's the windows hum and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I was home, and we were living in an apartment in Midtown, and I decided I was going to sell I had a D28 guitar that I had sold all my equipment when our band quit playing there at Tech, and it was just a hobby. And I was going to sell my D28 and get a classical guitar, and I had a lady I was supposed to call as a good instructor. And I could see myself just sitting there in the apartment, learning how to play a classical guitar. Well, she was on vacation for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was kind of anxious. And I got to listen to this tape about songwriting, and it said, well, if you're going to be a songwriter, all these guys down in Nashville talking about being hit songwriters kind of turned me on a little bit. And they said, well, you need to join the Songwriters Guild and Nashville Songwriters Association. So they happen to be very active in New York City. I joined the Songwriters Guild, started going to weekly songwriter workshops, and I met Shiela Davis. She was teaching some classes up there. Shiela Davis wrote some of the first really good books on songwriting, and she has some creativity workshops and stuff. And I took a couple of her workshops, and she just lived down the street from me. She lived over in Murray Hill, and I could walk down there. And on the weekends, she would, for $20 or what it was, she'd get people to come in, and you'd sit around her table, and she'd critique your songs and tell you all this kind of stuff. And Dory Weaver, she was there. I think we were there at the same time, but we didn't know each other. We get to talking about it, but Dory Weaver did the same thing. She belonged to the Guild, and she knew Shiela Davis, and she, and I started getting turned on to songwriting and everything. I hadn't really written anything good, I guess, and I got to thinking maybe I was a songwriter, and I joined the NSAI, and then they were having a big thing every year down in Nashville, and I went down there for like a week, and they stay in the hotel, and they have big seminars and everything, and Shiela Davis was going down there to be one of their big seminar teachers, and before she got up to speak, I was real proud. I knew Shiela Davis, I was down there. I was really hot dogging it, and she comes to me, she said, Harry, well, do you mind if I use one of your songs in my presentation today? I think it'd be good. And I said, why, sure. Shiela said, I would love it. And she said, well, wait a minute. Said, you need to understand. Said, what it is, said, your song is a perfect example of how not to mix your metaphors. And I think I had a new metaphor in every verse and on that song. So I said, well, sure, go ahead. I said, so anything was good for me. And so Shiela Davis got up and she made her talk to the whole 200, 300, 400, however, I don't know how many people was in there with my song as the perfect example of how to not write a song. But I learned a real lesson there is you don't mix your metaphors. When you write a song, you stick with your metaphor from the beginning to the end. If you start mixing your metaphor, that screws people up. And I learned that from her. And she was kind of funny about the way she would critique songs. She wouldn't let you play the music or anything. You critique the song. You'd lay the lyrics down. She'd go through the whole lyrics, and the more words you had, the worse it was. She would talk about these old classic songs, that some of those people wrote up there for those, the big hits, and how few words were in a song, and how. So if you now every time I see a song, if it's got a lot of words in it, I don't think it's a very well written song. I think back to what she said. Well, anyway, they moved us out of there. They took our whole division. We had the whole 17th floor in our building, and moved us back to Kansas City. I knew something was bad, and they moved our whole division back to Kansas City. We had some office buildings down there, and there was some big corporate woods, they called it, where we were going to have our offices and everything. And just weeks after we got down there, before I could even get my new job going, I didn't even know what my new job was, but this Roger Barenhausen, our VP, he had just got a divorce, and he was making big bucks. He was managing the whole division, and he had a nice house, and he met some lady on a trip that he kind of fell in love with, and she was from Kansas City, and she was a debutante, and it just so happened that she was a home decorator, decorated houses and stuff, and she was dating some guy, some European type guy that had a big business. I think he had sold poultry processing equipment all over the United States, and he had salesmen and stuff. Well, anyway, he started dating this girl, and this guy got really, really jealous, and hired one of his salesmen to kill Roger Barenhausen, which he did. This is the guy that he wasn't my boss, but he's one boss up, and we were kind of pretty good friends. And when you're working in a big company, you got to have people on your side. There's always two sides. There's the good guys and the bad guys, and you're always on the good guys, and there's always the bad guys, and they're always just like Democrats and Republicans. They're always fighting to get in charge. Well, Roger Barenhausen got killed, murdered. He had been to New York City with his girlfriend, and they came home, and at that airport there in Kansas City, and they got right up close. They had the underground parking where you pay $20, and farther out it's cheaper. But he was paying for the underground parking, and they went out to get his car. It was like on a Sunday night, and his car, someone had slit one of his tires, and he went to the trunk to get the spare tire, and this guy pulls up behind him. The killer did, and points a shotgun out the window, and three shots from the shotgun at point blank range, and killed Roger right there. He didn't do anything to the girl. She just screamed and ran. This guy was stupid. They caught him. They caught him later. He had left shotgun shells in a mouth, and names and addresses, and a bunch of stuff in this rental car, and he got the hell out of there, And but they found him. He was from Georgia or someplace. He was one of the salesmen. He owed money, and this guy had talked him into killing for him. And then he went on the run. The boyfriend went on the run, and they was chasing him like credit card purchases and stuff. And this made, I think, one of those American Most Wanted shows. I mean, this was stuff people just love to hear about. The two rich businessmen and a debutante, and one murders the other, and they were chasing him. And before it went too far, one day on the news, I said, well, they found him, and what happened? A game warden is a lady. She went down. She was going down to check on the lake. She was just doing her rounds one morning, and she saw this box in the middle of the road. And she stopped and looked at the box, and there's a brand new box, brand new vacuum cleaner in this box. But the hose was missing, and it had a note in it that said, "You'll find what you're looking for down at the lake." She went down at the lake, and this guy had bought a brand new vacuum cleaner, took the hose, stuck it to his tailpipe, and ran it around inside his car, and committed suicide. And anyway, our boss was dead, and they put one of the bean counters from New York in there, and it wasn't long after that they purchased the animal health division from SmithKline, which is like twice as big as us, and they asked me to leave. They paid me off. Luckily, I'd been there long enough. I'd been there like 23 years, something like that, and I made enough money I paid off my mortgage. And I started looking for a job. I was like 52, 53. And boy, I tell you what, I was overeducated. And it was hard to find a job. I had 2 or 3 little old jobs, worked for an ad agency for a while. They didn't want to hire me. They wanted me to be like a consultant. And my wife, she had a pretty good job, you know. She had worked like at Bellevue in New York City. I mean, that's a whole story right there I could tell you about her. But anyway, my neighbor got old and moved into a nursing home, one of these retirement homes, and he started telling me about. He said, "You ought to come out here and play for us, so we have entertainment." So I went out and played for him, and then I got to talk to the activity director, and she started telling me how all these other places said, "All you got to do is talk to these activity directors and go play for them." And so, make another long story short, I decided, I'm just going to make a job out of this. So, because I knew computers and all that kind of stuff, and I got this software. It's called what did they call it? Anyway, it was what I did. I created a database of activity directors within the driving range distance of Kansas City. I had almost 1,200 different places that I could potentially play at. You know, drive out, and I would play 2 or 3 places a day. And the job became filling up your calendar. And you talk to the activity director, and if they liked you, then you could book like the first Monday of every month, or the first Monday of every other month, the second Thursday of every month at 2:30, and then you fill up your calendar and you've got a job. You just keep going around, and it gets boring as hell after a while. But I was doing there one year I did almost 500 shows, and just old time gospel and all that stuff. And if you think you can just do any kind of music for these folks, you got another thing coming. I mean, they like music just like everybody else. And if you play the same songs over and over, or tell the same jokes over and over, they get bored with you, and they have a council. They'll fire you. So you got to be careful. I did that for almost 10 years, and I got bored. And the problem when you make something like that a job, music becomes not so enjoyable anymore. It's hard to sit down and write songs. I was writing songs. I joined the songwriter circle there in Kansas City, and I had a buddy in Nashville, and I'd go down and on weekends sometime and play like as a songwriter down there with him. Go with the Bluebird and the Broken Spoke and all that stuff. And I wrote quite a few songs, but it was kind of a weird time musically. And I swore that if I could ever not have to do that, I was going to not do that. And when my wife retired, we moved up here in 2012, I guess it was. And I looked in the Yellow Pages, or not the Yellow Pages, on the internet, and I saw the Dallas Songwriters, and here I am, and I'm thinking maybe I probably need to backtrack a little bit, but one of the important things that I skipped over that happened, that when you look back and you start seeing, that was probably a pretty important thing. I didn't really realize at the time. I was when I got out of college, my first time, I moved to Fort Worth and was working at Swift, and my grades were so good. My job was hog buyer. I wanted to be and a hog driver. I worked at Swift, and I was going to be a hog driver because I had all that experience. You know, it's a hard me, and I was walking around in hog manure all day long, cow manure, and those cattle pens over at Fort Worth. You know, my office was in that Fort Worth Stock Exchange. You know, the one with the horns on it, and. Make another long story short, I worked in the cattle pens before Billy Bob's was there. So I'm familiar with all that, but there was no Billy Bob's. It was Swift and Newhoff. And finally, they closed down all those old buildings. And when they closed down Swift, I went to UTA, worked on my MBA there, and then I didn't finish it there. I finished my MBA up in Kansas City several years later. But I was working on my MBA, and I had some friends there, and this one friend of mine, he said, "Hey, Harry," he said, so you play the guitar. I want you to listen to this record. And he said, have you ever listened to Woody Guthrie? I had no idea who Woody Guthrie was. That sounds stupid, but he showed me this Woody Guthrie record that Alan Lomax had done these interviews with Woody Guthrie, and I just flat fell in love with Woody Guthrie and everything he was about. He talked like me. He'd been to all the same places like me. And he had all these stories to tell, and he played music that I could play, and I just wore the grooves off that old record, just trying to be like Woody Guthrie. And I'll show you here in a little bit. Woody Guthrie, he spent a lot of time out there in the Texas Panhandle. That's where he wrote that song, "So Long It's Been Good to Know You." He did it in a sandstorm, and he just had all kinds of stories. If you ever get a chance, Alan Lomax, look up Alan Lomax and the Woody Guthrie interviews. Somebody's got their mic on. Where is that? And Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan loved Woody Guthrie. Bob Dylan went to see him when he was in the hospital dying and everything, but he just really kind of patterned himself after Woody Guthrie. And the other thing that happened when I was in grad school that I thought was important was a hippie taught me how to play the harmonica. And looking back, I was a resident manager of these apartment buildings we was living in, and this old hippie was laying there, and not laying there, but sitting there with a bunch of other people, and he's playing this harmonica. And I've been trying to learn, I couldn't learn, and he showed me that you got to play cross harp, and he showed me how to bend a note, and then I took it from there. That's how I learned how to play the harmonica. He showed me how to bend a note and how to play cross harp, and then you just strap that sucker on and you just start making noises when you're playing your song, and eventually the noises start sounding right. You just do it all by ear. But that was the key. And I learned that there. And Woody Guthrie, I learned to play some Woody Guthrie harmonica parts because I knew how that hippie had taught me how to play those bend those notes. And so that kept me going on the guitar. And when I got to New York, the songwriting classes and songwriting workshops and everything, that got me to going. And I was trying to figure out how to write a song. And I'm skipping around a little bit, but I knew that you got to write about stuff you know about. And this world class, the term world class, I was jogging in New York Rollers Club, and you always hearing about world class athletes, world class this, and one day I was just sitting there trying to figure out something to write a song about. You know how it is when you first start writing, man. You got to think of something. I can't think. And somehow I put world class, dirty old man, and I started writing verses for that. And the song just kind of wrote itself. And I went to a workshop. Billy Ed Wheeler had a workshop in North Carolina, and Billy Ed Wheeler was a co-writer on Jackson, for Johnny Cash. He had Ken Vassy was one of the guys with Kenny Rogers and that Kenny Rogers band. Ken Vassy, I think, wrote that song. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition is in. That was his song. He was one of the instructors there. And then Russ Zavitson, the producer and publisher for Achy Breaky Heart, he was one of our talkers. And they all loved World Class Dirty Old Man. Billy Ed Wheeler helped me write it. He should have been a co-writer on it, and I offered, but he didn't want to put his name on it. but he took the song and he gave it to Chet Atkins. Chet Atkins listened to that song. I said, what did Chet Atkins say? He said he didn't say anything. So he listened to the whole song, but he said he didn't say anything. But Chet Atkins heard that song. And Russ Zavitzson, he took the tape. He said, oh, I like that. He said, I think I got a place for that, but I can't guarantee. Then he came back and he said, nobody wants to sing it. Said, no one wants to say I'm a dirty old man. So, but that experience there was what made me decide, maybe I can be a songwriter. I mean, because I realized I was talking about something because I was a dirty old man. I was a salesman. I'd been in and out all them bars and honky tonks and stuff. I was on the road. I had a expense account. I lost my first wife because of I couldn't handle all that freedom. And if you've ever been around a bunch of salesmen, they tell jokes, and it's just a talking, laughing, fun bunch of people, and you're in and out all these places. And there's this bar in Amarillo. It's called the Sapango. They actually Sip and Go is what, if you look at the sign, but they call it Sapango. It's one of the top 10 hottest bars in Texas for a long time. And you go in there like 5 o'clock, and old Al Rogers. Some of y'all might remember Al Rogers. He had a hit song a long time ago, kind of a minor hit. He had he played like an organ, and he'd play the bass with his feet and everything. He really get that music going. He'd start like at 5, and you go in there, just be crowded as could be, and it'd be so crowded the bar hop she would grab you and set you down at a table with other people you didn't even know, just because there wasn't any room. And you never had to order a drink. She'd come by and pick your drink up and rattle it. I mean, she knew before you knew. She knew you needed a drink before you needed a drink. So you just sat there and she'd set them up. But anyway, I walked in there one day about like 5 o'clock, and it's full. And I just went over and sit down at the bar. There was a seat there at the bar, and there's a empty seat right beside me, but someone had been drinking a drink there. Their half full glass was right there, and a pack of cigarettes and a cigarette lighter and something. I sat there and looked out there, and there's this old khaki guy, and had an old cap on. He was dancing with this young lady and whirling around the song. I quit singing the song, and the lady runs over a table and sits down. He follows her over. This guy follows her over there, and she wouldn't get back up and dance the next song. So he comes over and sits down right beside me. That was where he was sitting. And just to be nice, I looked at her and said, that gal's a little too young for you, isn't she? And he looked at me and grinned. He says, the older I get, the younger I need them. And then 20 or 15 years later, or whatever it was, that when I was writing songs, that popped up. That's how you write songs. Just, you start remembering stuff. And I wrote some really dirty songs that I can't play for anybody because I was such a dirty person. Sometimes, all those jokes and things. And that was what I had to work. I had to work on cleaning up my songs, so I could play them. Now, I think I kind of got worked through that. But anyway, I'm not real sure where I'm at. I know I've skipped a lot of stuff here. I made some notes. But somehow I got here, and I'm so proud. I found Dallas Songwriter. I didn't know if it didn't look all that important when I looked it up on the internet. I saw this listing. There's Dallas Songwriters, and they were like meeting at Half Price Books, and there's another something. And I decided to go to one of the meetings. I went to one of the meetings. That's where I met Barb and everybody. And then and I started volunteering for stuff, and the way it has kind of worked out, I'm kind of doing now, I know it may sound a little strange, I'm kind of doing now what I was doing when I left Pfizer. I was a sales system, I was, what do they call it? Manager sales system. That's what it had a comma in it. Manager, sales system. And I was doing a lot of, I guess you call it not financial analysis, but marketing programs and everything. We had all these complicated programs and stuff, and all the managers needed certain kinds of reports. And every day I download all this data off the big computer and print out all these reports and stuff. And so we're starting to work with maps and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, that's kind of my aptitude and interest is computers and stuff. And then I got to while I was living in Kansas City, doing all that nursing home stuff, I started hitting the open mics and stuff up there, and there's some really good musicians in Kansas City. I don't know if you've ever been up there, and I got made really good friends with Michael O'Rourke. He had toured with he would play the banjo and the guitar and everything. Hell of a personality guy. He at the Ricky Skaggs. They did state fairs and everything. He played with Ricky Skaggs, and then there's another guy, Norton Canfield. This super songwriter, and I got to be buddies with all these guys, and I started going in and recording them, and then I got like a camcorder and started recording them. And I just enjoyed the hell out of just going in and just getting all this raw footage in these old bars and stuff of these guys playing. I enjoyed that more than listening to the CDs, you know. So when I got down here, everything just started kind of falling together, and I started volunteering for stuff. And guys, if you don't want to work your butt off, don't volunteer to be on the board. So they're gonna, because if they find out what you're good at, that'll end up being your job. But I enjoy it, and so now I'm kind of doing. If I look back at my life, all these little different things, decisions, bad decisions, good, it all kind of leads to right here where I'm at now. I don't know if you'd call that destiny or whatever, but you know, I'm a firm believer that we hardly ever. I don't think you ever get a big opportunity. You know, all we get every day, we get little opportunities, and the big opportunities, that's what we create. We take those little opportunities and we turn them into big opportunities. You know, like when you get someone asks you to take a promotion to move to another territory or something, you know, maybe they seem like a lesser job or whatever. You know, I never said no to anything. Every time someone asked me to do something like that, I'd say yes, and I go, and then another door would open. And all of them led to right here. And this sounds silly, but I finally got, after I was thinking about this, what I was going to say today, and I know I've kind of screwed a lot of stuff up, and I glossed over a lot of stuff. But when I was listening to that Woody Guthrie record all that time, what really impressed me and got me hooked was Alan Lomax. It wasn't Woody Guthrie. Alan Lomax. I don't know if you know who Alan Lomax is, but he was hired by the Library of Congress to go all over the world and record all these musicians and singers, you know, and the Delta blues and folk singers and everything. He went to one of his best recordings. They call it the Bristol Recordings. He had an old Westinghouse recorder. They didn't even call it country music then, or hillbilly. They called it hill music, I think. And he went to Bristol, Tennessee, and they ran an ad in the paper, and then there for like a week, all these people, they just came out of the hills and recorded. You know, old Jimmy Rogers, he came in there and recorded some songs. The Carter family, they came in and recorded some songs. And they all got their start right there recording for Alan Lomax. And that, you know what you call what he is? That's ethnomusicologist. So from now on, I am the ethnomusicologist for the Dallas Songwriters Association. Okay, now we're gonna quit talking. I could keep on talking and rambling, but we're here, and I'm gonna hide myself on this video so y'all can see what this thing is behind me, and I want to go over it just a little bit.
Yeah.
This is a. Hang on.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
There we go.
Okay, can y'all see that?
Yeah.
If you see my cursor, up in the upper left-hand corner, you've got the state of Texas, and then you got the little square there, and right there's a 2. That's Lubbock.
Yeah.
And that would be what I would call the South Plains. The 1 up there, that's Amarillo. Okay. You probably can't see can you see the cursor?
Can't see the cursor.
Oh, okay. Well, start down there in the at the very bottom there. You see Harry Hewlett. That's about where I grew up. About where my name is. And right above that, Steve Metter. I don't know if anyone knows who Steve Metter is. He was just a snotty-nosed little kid, about 8 years younger than me. He and my nephew, they kind of played in a little band together. Steve Metter ended up being one of the number one drummer in the state of Texas as far as on call and for all the studios down in Austin and everything. And he spent the 90s playing for Leonard Cohen. He was Leonard Cohen's drummer. Just a little old kid. He lived about a mile. His farm was about a mile from where I grew up. And all of these just little old pissant towns, you know, and like they talked about in in the Little Whorehouse of Texas, if you ever seen that. Best Little Whorehouse of Texas. Steve Metter, and then you see Bobby Keys and Don Caldwell. That was Slayton, Texas, right there. That's where Bobby Keys. That's where he grew up. Little old town, just a little old flat country town. All of us, I think, kind of had similar backgrounds. And then if you go back down to the left over there, which says you say Gary P. Nunn. Gary P. Nunn was from Brownfield. Sonny Curtis over there, he was from Meadow. Sonny Curtis was one of the Crickets. He wrote the song I Fought the Law and the Law Won. Remember that?
Yep.
Now, Sonny Curtis, he never actually played with the Buddy Holly and the Crickets. He played with Buddy Holly before it was Buddy Holly and the Crickets. And then I think after Buddy Holly died, he was one of the Crickets. But he was all part of that, and he wrote the theme song to Mary Tyler Moore, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Wow. Sonny Curtis. And he was just a little old town, just like Wilson, about population 400. We played them in football, and he was older than me. Most of those guys like that, they were about 8 years older than me. Sonny Curtis was. Gary P. Nunn and I, we're the same age. I think Gary's 1 year younger than me. Then you go up there, the Esquires. That was the band I was in. I put that there because Sam Newberry, the guy I played with, he was from Levelland, and some of the Sparkles were from Levelland. The Sparkles, I was doing some research on them. They had like 3 or 4 different groups of guys over a couple of decades that were the Sparkles. When I knew them, they were probably the top band out there in the South Plains. They were. There's a guy named Lucky Floyd sang and played the drums, and then Bobby Smith played the bass. Donnie, somebody from Levelland, played rhythm, and then you had Stan Smith. I think he was from Abilene. He was a lead guitar player. But those guys were good, and Gary P. Nunn, I think, claims that he played for the Sparkles for a while, and I was going to challenge that till I got to reading. When Gary moved down to Austin, some of the Sparkles moved down there and they regrouped, and that's when Steve Weisberg became the lead guitar, I think it was, for the Sparkles. He played for the Sparkles. That was where the Sparkles came in. Over there in the lower left-hand corner, you see Roy Orbison and Guy Clark. Well, Roy, that was several miles, probably 100 miles or something like that, south of there. It's kind of on the New Mexico border. Roy Orbison, he was from Wink, and Guy Clark, he was from Monahans, which is like west and a little bit south from Midland, Odessa, that area down there. Country boys, Waylon Jennings, he's from a little town up here called Littlefield, up here if you start going up the top. Then up there on the left, you see Norman Petty Studio. That's where everybody recorded. Even old Rio King, he recorded over there. And Larry Trotter from Last Buddy, he was kind of Buddy Holly's replacement with the Crickets there for a while. I don't think he ever really made it, but he had some minor hits and stuff all throughout the years. John Denver over on the lower left, that's about where Roswell, New Mexico would be. That's where John Denver was born. And he was going to Texas Tech when I was up there. One of the guys you see up at the very top, you see Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs, and then the Rhythm Masters. The Rhythm Masters, it was a band kind of like us, the Esquires, and I ran into him at the Sapango one night with the lead guitar player, and we got to talking, and he was laughing. He said, "Did you know John Denver lived in our dorm?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." He said, "Yeah." I said, "John Denver said he had a different name, John Dusendorf or something like that." And he said, "That son of a gun," said, "we would practice in the basement," and said John Denver would come down and want to play us every time we'd practice it. John Denver would come down there and want to play, and John Denver was this nerdy folk singer, you know. And he said, we hated it when John Denver come down and said we'd let him play us a couple songs, sing us a couple of songs just to get rid of him. And years later, of course, John Denver became big and important. And this guy, he said he sent him a copy of they had a recording of him playing with the Rhythm Masters. And he sent him a tape and a nice little letter, and John Denver would never replied. Jimmy Gilmer, does anybody remember the Sugar Shack?
Oh, yeah, I remember Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs. They played
Jimmy Gilmer
down at UT.
Jimmy Gilmer, he was from Amarillo, and the Fireballs, they were from Raton, and they recorded that Sugar Shack at Norman Petty. I was in Don Caldwell's studio one day, and he had this old tape recorder over there. He's an old reel-to-reel and big old square box. And he said, "Harry, see that? Is that tape recorder?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said there's a 50-50 chance that Sugar Shack was recorded on that tape machine. Said Norman Petty had 2 tape recorders in his studio at that time, and he said, "I got one of them." And he said, "But I don't know for sure which one it was." But he showed me that. And then down from the Rhythm Masters up there, you see Buddy Knox. Remember Party Doll?
Mm-hmm.
Buddy Knox. He was from Happy, Texas, little town just like Wilson. And then he was a rocker back in the '50s. I think is when that record came along. And then you had the String Along south there. That was Levelland. They were kind of they had a one big hit. It was just an instrumental. They were kind of like a country version of, or a small town version of the Ventures. Remember the Ventures? All those songs they did. There were a lot of instrumental songs back then.
They did a song called Wheels.
Yes, I think that's their song. The String Alongs, Wheels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was their song, Wheels. And then you get down to Lubbock County there. Well, Buddy Holly, I never knew Buddy Holly. He was about 8 years older than me, and when he made the scene, and when I got to Texas Tech, I needed a job, and I sold all my pig money, and I had to get a job that second semester, and I started working at a Frank McGlone office supply. And this kind of a tall, dark-haired guy came in there one day, older-looking fella, and this fella I was working with, Buddy, he said, "Hey, Harry," he said, "see that guy over there?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's Buddy Holly's daddy." His daddy had a office, some kind of business right there close to where I was working, but Buddy Holly was already dead by that time. Mac Davis, I never knew. He was older, but Mac Davis is the person that taught me that happiness was Lubbock in my rearview mirror, and that's when I got old enough to leave Lubbock, I did. And then when I got to New York City, guess who came up there to be the star on the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas? Mac Davis. And they ran him out there after a while. Don Caldwell was telling me a funny story about him. He said when they changed the street names and stuff, it was really doing a lot to honor Buddy Holly, and Mac Davis was getting jealous. They named the street after Buddy Holly. And Mac Davis petitioned the city council to name a street after him, so they gave him a street too because he was jealous. So Buddy Holly and Mac Davis both have streets named after him up there, and I have a song that's got both of them in it. And one thing I want to point out: all these people were rock and rollers. I mean, nobody played country, when we were kids. I mean, once rock and roll hit, it was rock and roll. Country was adult music. Every little town had a VFW hall and stuff like that where the adults said they have country music sometime. And after every rodeo, there would be a country dance and people would dance. But it was rock and roll. And Joe Ely was in a band just like we were when I was up there. I met him a couple of times. Then after I got out and finally got married to my first wife, she graduated from Lubbock High School with him, and come find out they dated. My first wife dated Joe Ely. I don't know how long they dated or whatever happened there, but Joe Ely, and they were boyfriend, girlfriend kind of. And then the Maines brothers, I got out of there right about the time they kind of hit. I kind of left in 69-ish, and I think they came along in 1970-ish. And I met one of the Maines brothers once. I was in Don Caldwell's studio, and the one that plays the harmonica had come in there. They were doing a commercial, and I'm not sure which Maines brothers. I think Kenny. I think his name is Kenny. I met him. Harrod's Music Store, that was where everybody bought everything, and Buddy Holly bought his Strats there. And then, just as a funny story, the lower right-hand corner, Jeannie C. Riley, that was part of my sales territory, and I remember driving down through there, Astronaut or one of those little towns, and just a little big town, and had a Texaco filling station right there on the corner. And this guy had gone to a lot of trouble to have someone paint this nice big sign. He had one of those tripod things out there in front of the gas stations, gas pumps, and it said, "Uncle of Jeannie C. Riley." he was proud of that. Jeannie C. Riley. I think that's the only song she could sing that she sang that wasn't out of tune, but she sure had a big hit with that, Anyway. And then I put Bob Wills up there. Bob Wills, that's in Turkey, this little old town up there. I don't think he was born there, but he lived there long enough that they have Bob Wills weekend up there. And Bob Wills, I think, was very important. He all he played was dance. Every time he would go someplace, they danced. And all these other people you see up here, every time they were playing out there, they were playing for dances, and everything we played for was dances. Hardly ever. It was very rare for someone to like do a concert. Yeah, I mean, when you got hard to do something, you went and played, and people got out there and danced, and they drank, and they did everything else that you do when you're drinking and dancing. And I got out of Lubbock just in time. I mean, pot and stuff like that was just kind of getting popular when I finally got out of school. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. I was having so much fun. I had enough hours. I think if you added up, I could have had a PhD, but I never could figure out what I wanted to major in. And my grade point average was like 7. It's like I'm not even sure I had a good enough grade point average to get out of there. They finally just kicked me out of there and gave me a degree, and I got out of there. Then up here in the upper right-hand corner, this is kind of interesting. Glenn D. Harden. I don't know if who he is. There's a little town up here, just a few miles north. It's not in this. It's in this other the number 1 section up there, with the Amarillo and everything. Glenn D. Harden. He was a little country kid, played the piano, and he was Elvis Presley's keyboardist. Glenn D. Harden, hell of a keyboard player. Jimmy Webb and Roger Miller both grew up in that same kind of country up there. If you get on I-40 and head east from Amarillo, right when you cross the line there, the Oklahoma line, just a mile or two, there's a little town called Eric, Oklahoma. That's where Roger Miller. They claim that it's his hometown. I don't know if he was born there or not. But there's a big sign out there. And then Jimmy Webb, wrote all those Glenn Campbell songs. He's about 30 miles from Eric there, right there in that same old dry area up there, from that part of the country. And I don't know if I overshot anybody here or not, but
Rio King.
Now Rio King. when I was at living there and going to school at Tech and everything, I heard this song on the radio. It was instrumental. Everybody had instrumental songs, and there's a local band, I forget their name, but they had this song called Dream Thing. It was a nice song, and they were playing it a lot. This jockey was playing it, and I had I didn't have any idea who the guys were. I'd never met them, and I had forgotten all about that till I joined the Dallas Songwriters Association. And I met Rio King, and we got to talking. He'd gone to Tech, I'd gone to Tech. Make another long story short, that was Rio King, his band. They had written this song, and they went to Norman Petty's studio and recorded it, just like Buddy Holly and all of them did. They went up there and recorded a song at Norman Petty's studio, and they were playing it on radio there in Lubbock. And so I thought, just because I like Rio, I was going to put his name on this map, so someone like you would ask that question. I'm glad. Thank you for asking that question. And but all that old country out there, every county you see there is just flat, dry. The wind blows, but you can raise cotton out there, sort of, if it's dry, if you get enough rain, if it rains right. And then they discovered water that you could dig them old wells, and put up that circular irrigation and everything. And man, that country just come alive. Lubbock grew. It's got the biggest cotton oil mill in the world. They've got Texas Tech. They got a medical school there. They got a law school, and the population has just really grown out there. And people don't live on the farms anymore. I don't know if y'all ever seen that song I wrote, Ain't No Family on This Farm Anymore. Well, everybody moved off the farms. The tractors got bigger, and then farmers got bigger, and most of the farmers now live in some little old town, and rather than working 160 acres of land, which there's a lot of old houses on these old little plots of land, they're working like several sections, square miles of land. They have these big tractors, and my daddy was a self-trained entomologist. He never graduated from high school, and neither did my mother. But he was smarter than any of those people up there at Texas Tech as far as identifying crop insects. Guys would come from 100 miles around to get him to come look at their crops and tell them about their insects. And he was also a diviner. My daddy was, and they would come from miles around to get him to find where to drill their irrigation wells. And he'd never charge them anything. He'd come home with a load of cantaloupes or a load of watermelon or whatever. But he would get a green elm tree fork and you hold it kind of in front of you. I have to show you how to do it, but that's what he used. And they would blindfold him and spin him around and everything, and walk him across the field and drive him across the field in their pickup. And that old rod, wherever the water was, that old rod would point down. And he never swore by it, and he didn't get paid for it. But I bet you at least half the irrigation wells out in that part of the country, at least a couple of counties away from where we live, my daddy divined those. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's anything to that or not. And a lot of people think that's crazy, but he was one of these guys. You've heard of guys that can't wear a watch. If you give him a watch, it just stops. That's what he was. You give him a watch, it just stops. So
magnetic forces.
Something, and I don't know. I mean, if y'all got any questions, or y'all want me to just stop and we start our song critiques, I kind of petered out here. I glossed over a lot of stuff, and I talked a little fast, but I hope y'all enjoyed that.
Oh, we love hearing about that, Harry. You've met so many people. It's just amazing.
Well, that's only the half of it there, but
when did you move to Dallas, Harry?
2012.
Okay, so pretty recent.
Yeah, I moved to Dallas in 2012.